Welcome to the 4Heroes podcast. In this episode, Chaplain Frank Mercer continues leading law enforcement officers at the Huddle through a Bible study on the book of Exodus. The first of the 10 commandments challenges us with some really important questions. Is God the number one priority in your life? How does this impact our thoughts, actions, decisions, and relationships? As believers, as creations that bear the image of God, we're called to recognize and uphold God as our ultimate priority. So join us as Frank unpacks the significance of this commandment and talks about what it means to truly honor God as the one and only in our lives.
Happy Monday. I hope you guys have a great day. Hope you had a great weekend, and the week ahead is going to be beautiful. Man, the weather sounds like it's going to be great. It's not supposed to get into the 90s at all. It's going to be in the 60s in the mornings. Yeah. Pam's already planted her flag. She says it's fall time, just nobody else knows it yet. She's had enough. I'm very, very happy to see you guys. Last week, we talked about how the Israelites came to the base of Mount Sinai. They left Egyptian bondage 3 months previous to this. They've had all kinds of adventures between Egypt and Sinai, and now they've arrived at the mountain of God. We talked a little bit last week about how before you're delivered, before you're rescued from bondage and living in the land of the dying, there's not really an expectation of obedience. It doesn't matter how good you are. There's nothing you can do to save yourself. It takes a rescuer. It takes a deliverer. It took Moses, for us, the greater Moses is Jesus, to deliver us, to free us from the land of bondage, the land of death, to bring us into the land of the living, to take us eventually into the promised land. And at that point, it makes sense that he would have an expectation of obedience. So when the people come to Mount Sinai, they needed, because we all need, somebody to spell it out. What's obedience to God? Following kind of your moral compass, maybe. I mean, certainly worship, but what does it look like to be faithful? What does it look like to be obedient? God gives them 10 commandments. You've heard of these, I would imagine. Let me read just the very beginning of Exodus 20, and then we'll talk about it. God spoke these words, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." He delivered them, he rescued them, he did for them what they could not do for themselves. Verse 3, command number 1, "You shall have no other gods before me." Can you name the 10 commandments? I'm asking rhetorically, not asking you to name them. But I find that a lot of people, my age, most of you are about my age, some a little older, some a little younger, we know the names of the Three Stooges. Larry, Moe, Curly. Larry, Moe, Shemp. Larry, Moe, Curly, Joe. We know the names of the 4 Beatles, John, Paul, George, Ringo. We know the ingredients of a Big Mac. 2 all-beef patties, lettuce, cheese, special sauce. Thank you, Chief. But 10 commandments, less than 15% of Americans can name the 10 commandments. It's important to know that the commandments are given not as a ladder, not as a way to God. They actually serve as a mirror, to show you your need for God. The ladder idea is something that, it's like, well, I can attain perfection if I just obey the commands, but I don't know. Most of us have been around long enough to know that we can't obey the commandments. I mean, we struggle, we stumble, we fall. Not that that should be our reason for sinning. I can't, so I just won't. The commandments serve as a mirror, When you wake up in the morning, you may feel like, I need to wash my face. But when you look in the mirror, you realize, I really need to wash my face. I don't know about you, but I got a little bit of, dried up drool hanging out of the corners of my mouth, and those eye boogers have collected in the corners, and I need to brush my teeth. This hair, I gotta This doesn't just happen, y'all. It's a lot of work. Yeah, I need a mirror. The commandments serve as a mirror to show me that I am not clean. I need to be washed. I need to make some changes. They are kind of a loving fence that God has put around us because He cares for us to prevent us from going and doing things that we should not go and do. I've thought of them before as a line of track. We've got this train that runs through Tyrone. I sat at the train tracks about 20 minutes last Saturday morning, waiting. Yeah, it's super important that train stay on track, right? Now, if the train thinks to itself, look at all this beautiful countryside. I'd like to be free to go where I want to go. Why do I have to stay on these tracks? They're limiting me. That looks like freedom. If I just jump the track and go over there, that looks like freedom. Now, if the train jumps the track and tries to go over there, that's actually looks like a disaster. That's not freedom. Think of a kite on a string, You're out at the beach. You got the kite on the string. It's fun for the kid on the beach who's holding the kite, but the kite itself might very well be up in the sky thinking, hey, this is cool, I'm flying and all, but I'd really like to go over there. I'd really like to do this or that. Look at those people parasailing. That looks like fun. But if it breaks free from the string, it's just going to fall and crash. Think of it like this. Have you ever had goldfish? You get a couple of goldfish in a little goldfish bowl. You fill it with water and you feed them and you put in all the stuff to make the water livable for them. You even get them a little toy castle and treasure chest and all the stuff that you can put in the bottom, the rocks. But the fish are in there and it's like, hey, this is cool and everything. But if I could just get out of this, I could be like that guy making himself a sandwich. I could be watching TV. I could finally have the remote control if I could get out of here. If the glass shatters in the goldfish bowl, the fish discovers that getting out of the bowl is not freedom at all. The fish is going to floppity flop on the ground for a little while, and then it's going to stop flopping because what it thought was freedom is actually death. The commandments work like that. They're a fence. They are a track to keep us on track. They are a tether to keep us afloat. And they're a goldfish bowl to keep us in an environment that is safe for us. That's how the commandments function. David says in Psalm 119, "Oh, how I love your law." He loved the law because he understood that the law was there for his good, not to prevent him from enjoying life. God is not that cosmic killjoy who wants to take away all the fun stuff. God loves you. He loves you so much that he set parameters up in which we are to live. That's what the commandments are. The Ten Commandments break into two parts. The first four commandments are all about our relationship with God, this vertical relationship that we have with God. The last six commandments are all about our relationship with others, the horizontal part of our life, how I relate to other people. We want to talk about commandment number 1. No other gods before me. I thought about, there's 10 commandments. If we do a commandment every week, that's a lot of commandments. That's like 2.5 months of talking about the 10 commandments. Consolidating these is really hard. Well, I thought about, we could talk about the first 4 that are all, vertical, and then we could talk about the last 6 that are all horizontal. It's like, it's a lot of information. So we're going to go sort of week to week. There's some weeks that we might talk about 2, but most weeks we're going to talk about 1. And don't hold me to the 2. Commandment number 1 is huge because it's the foundation for the other 9. It's the foundation for how we're supposed to live. No other gods before me. I think it's important to know that before has a double meaning. It can mean in the sense of priority, that I have no other God that takes the place of the one true God. There's nothing in my life that I worship, that I serve, that I adore, that I love as much as I love him. And I think that's an accurate reading. But I think it's also accurate to understand that in the Hebrew, this can literally mean in my face, in front of my eyes. You should have no other God, little g God, that you're running around with right in front of my face. It's personal. It's very personal. Now consider that there is never a time when you're not right in front of God's face. When you give yourself to something else, he is a witness to that. It happens before him. It happens right in front of him, right in front of his eyes. We're going to read next week that God is a jealous God. That's not a character flaw. It's not jealousy in the sense of a flawed character. It's jealousy in the sense that, I'm jealous of my wife's affections. I can't imagine seeing her with someone else. It would absolutely break my heart if I did. I'm jealous of her affections, and she's jealous of mine. We expect that we are in an exclusive relationship, that neither of us are chasing after somebody else. It's exclusive. It's just her. For her, it's just me for whatever reason. So just as I don't intend to share my wife with anyone else, God does not intend to share you with other gods, little g God. He doesn't. He's not going to play second fiddle. He's not going to take second place. Maybe at your church you sing a song, What a Beautiful Name. Let me read you some of the lyrics. I promise not to sing them. You have no rival. You have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom. Yours is the glory. Yours is the name above all names. God's not just one among many or even the best among many. He is the one true God who deserves your complete allegiance, my total loyalty. Is it a surprise that this comes as the first command? Some people would have started with things like murder or stealing or lying. Again, everything else in your life begins here because you will always serve what you worship. You'll always serve what you worship. God's saying, you're my people. You're called to live a life that reflects who I am. So, question for you. Is he the number one priority in your life? And think about it. In your inner life, the parts of you that nobody sees, your thoughts, your dreams, your hopes, your plans, do they reflect that he's your number one priority? In your outer life, in how you behave, in the choices that you make, in what comes out of your mouth, does it reflect that he is your number one priority? In how you interact with others, does that reflect that he's your number one priority? That's why sometimes when I talk about our law enforcement officers, you'll hear me say, part of their calling is to show the world what it looks like when Jesus wears a badge and a gun, because you're making him the number one priority in your life. And more than anything else, you're choosing to glorify God through the important work that you do. And maybe it's not even fair to ask you that question. Maybe instead of asking yourself, if you're married, you ought to ask your spouse, do you think that God's my number one priority? Or your best friend, somebody who knows you really, really well and loves you enough to tell you the truth about yourself. Ask them, do you think that I'm a person who is fully devoted to following Jesus and glorifying God in every part of my life? It'd be an interesting question. I'd love to know what you come up with. One of our Tyrone officers told me that he'd been clocking cars up on Highway 74 looking for speeders. Car went by. He said they weren't going super fast, but they were going fast enough. He pulled up behind them, lights and siren, pulled them over, came up alongside the vehicle. He said the driver was a female, and there was only one other person in the car. There was a guy in the passenger seat in the front. He was wearing a hat and wearing sunglasses. And when he came up to the window, the guy didn't look at him at all. Just the woman. Had a little conversation with her, asked for her license. He took her license, he walked back to his unit, sat down, looked up the tag, discovered that it was registered to a man named Zach Brown. Does that ring a bell for you? Yeah, Zach Brown. He thought about it for a minute. That guy in the passenger side had looked kind of familiar. He walked back up to the car, leaned into the window, gave the woman a verbal warning, not going to write you a ticket today, but you need to keep the speed down. And he looked over at the guy and he said, "Sir, are you?" And before he could finish the question, the guy pulled his sunglasses down to the bridge of his nose, winked and smiled at the officer and said, "The one and only." Y'all have a nice day. I love that story. But you know, have no other gods before me is a declaration that I am to be the one and only in your life. You have no other priority that's higher than me. And we're supposed to reflect that in our choices, in our behavior, in the words that come out of our mouth, in our thoughts, in our dreams, in our plans, in our hopes, in how we interact with each other, and all of those things. This is the basis of the other 9. No other gods before you. I want you to think about that this week, would you? Give that some thought, and we'll hit commandment number 2 next week. I'm excited about it. That's all I got to say about it this morning. Let me pray for you.
Thank you for listening to the 4Heroes podcast. The first commandment is more than just a rule. It's a call to prioritize the one who deserves our attention and worship. Just as the Israelites were asked to place God above all else, we are also invited to live out that commitment every day. So take a moment to reflect. Is God number 1? Let that question guide your actions, your thoughts, and your heart. When we place Him first, we align ourselves with His purpose and experience a deeper, more fulfilling relationship with Him. Today, your life can point others to the one and only.